and gentlemen, pick your dystopia. Are we going to be in a 1984 world where Big Brother is watching your every move and patrolling to make sure that no wrong think can be heard by anyone?
In the last few months, there has been a flurry of loud and angry debates on social media about what can be said and what ideas can be expressed.
Are we going to be in something more like Brave New World, where people just don't want to engage with certain information?
Have you heard of cancel culture? A growing trend on social media where people collectively decide someone is, quote, canceled based on something negative they did or said. Decide someone is, quote, canceled.
Or maybe it's going to be more like Fahrenheit 451, where people are so offended by everything that everything must be banned and we must burn books.
So in case you haven't heard, Amazon, one of the most powerful monopolies in the world, as a matter of fact, one of the most powerful companies in the world, has been effectively burning books.
Well, I think it's a little bit of all of them.
Hey guys, so I apologize in advance for my voice. I'm a bit under the weather. But I think this is a really important point that needs to be made, because what we're seeing right now isn't just mass censorship. In 2018, there was a new push, and tech companies began really focusing on what they call quote-unquote social responsibility.
Now, companies are really starting to take that bigger look at how they're changing their industry, how they're embedding themselves into people's lives, and more they're starting to talk about what are their real responsibilities to society as a whole.
And in the last video we put up, I played a small part of a Bill Gates clip towards the end where he's discussing his opinion on fake news or disinformation online. But I want to play a little bit more of that clip because he says something in there that it's being missed by people, that this is what's actually going to happen. So first, let's hear what Bill Gates has to say.
My assumption, going into the digital era was that the more people who could publish and the fact you could have reputation systems about what was reliable would mean that we'd have more voices out there and we would become more knowledgeable and society would benefit from that depth of understanding. What we're seeing now, which is an offset to that benefit, are people clustering in communities where they're listening to things that are attacks on the people they don't like, even if they're true or not. I hope that people's desire is to know the truth and to share ideas with other people. But it certainly is being questioned whether it's working that way or not. And a lot of debate about, well, then what's the responsibility of the network to expose people to different points of view or filter out things that are wrong? And it's a tough thing to be put in that position. What is hate speech? What is so anti-scientific that it shouldn't be out there? So the digital era, it's new and it is a bit concerning.
So you hear him talking about how people are clustering into online communities based on what they're interested in, which is, I don't know why they didn't think that was what was going to happen. I mean, it only makes logical sense to me. But then he says, and I think this is really key, there's a lot of debate about what the responsibility is of the network to expose people to other points of view. So right now we're seeing this huge censorship push. And I mean, they're trying to stop people from criticizing governments, to not be able to question major breaking news events, to telling people that the science is just settled and there's no debate on specific scientific topics. And essentially that history is written by the victors and we can't question historical events.
A leaked Google briefing earlier this week revealed how the internet giant and others like Facebook and Twitter are increasingly policing which content stays online and which doesn't.
More than 800 pages banned by Facebook, and these are not some fringe accounts, conspiracy peddlers or extremists. Some of the pages have been around for years and have millions of followers.
This is censorship. The online world is the new public sphere, and it's wrong that major corporations like Facebook, like Instagram, have the power to remove opinions from public consideration.
There is a dangerous precedent being set here, where the big tech companies have appointed themselves as the gatekeepers of political thought and opinion.
So, really dangerous, okay, to not just freedom of speech, but freedom of thought.
Right now, it looks like anyone talking about this 11-year-old drag kid, which, by the way, we can't talk about, because anyone right now talking about this individual in a critical context or even a reporting context that this individual or their families does not like, automatically the videos on YouTube are being disappeared and, of course, hit with fake copyright strikes.
Books are being digitally burned.
A lot of people are saying, Amazon's a private company, they can ban whatever books they want. Do we want to live in a world where companies which control the majority of book sales and ebook sales for the most part can ban books?
You have anything deemed, quote unquote, an authoritative source, which we know who's making those decisions. The authoritative sources are all being promoted, while small independent thinkers are getting demonetized, demoted, banned, and algorithms are being changed to bury their information.
They're just like, oh, it's propaganda. Well, you know what? Guess what? It's only propaganda if one side of the story is being told.
See, here's what's going on in the broadest stroke of things is the internet made possible, what they always call a democratization of views or voices. And now people have begun to talk, and there's a complete diversity of viewpoints. There's people from every conceivable viewpoint, and they have spoken on the internet, and everyone who wants a channel has set one up, and there are blogs all across the web, and they have totally owned and discredited the mainstream media, pointed out all their many fallacies and lies and shortcomings, and people have made known how unhappy they are with the status quo and the system that's going on. And they have become vocally outspoken online, and the system hates it, and they're trying to reclaim the territory, they're trying to sanitize it, and they're trying to reclaim the narrative for their corporate partners.
We're going to have to rebuild within this wild, wild west of information flow some sort of curating function that people agree to.
But it's one step farther to come out and claim that these networks have a responsibility to expose people to other points of view, or essentially what is the official accepted point of view. That's a whole new level than just censoring. Aaron brought this up in the last video too, and I want to dive into this just a little bit deeper to show you what Bill Gates is talking about. YouTube, which is owned by Google, which is a parent company called Alphabet. I think about that every time I do one of these videos. They put out this document in February, so just last month, called How Google Fights Disinformation. And they specifically mention that disinformation means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. So right away, not everyone is going to even agree on what that means. But they go on to say it's to purposefully disseminate information that you know to be inaccurate with the hope that others believe it's true, or to create discord in society. Well, because what's accurate, according to Google, are sources like Wikipedia and authoritative sources such as mainstream media outlets. And this has been pointed out. It's a really good point that there's no way for these companies to make algorithms that are sophisticated enough to be able to tell the difference between quote-unquote blatantly false, misleading information and a conspiracy theory that might turn out to be totally true. There are lots of examples, and this guy makes the point that this would be the same as if you had, back during the Watergate days, prior to that coming out, if all the newspapers got together and said, we're banning all stories on this topic. We're just not even going to allow anyone to talk about it at all. Even though that's totally something that turned out to be true, there's lots of things that turn out to be true. There's no possible way, with how many posts are being made to these social media outlets in just the span of a single minute. You're talking about millions of posts. There's no way for them to do that in a way that they can do that with human beings. That is something that only computer algorithms are handling. And so they're just blanket banning things because there's no way to do this any other way. And there's no way for them to make a sophisticated enough algorithm that can really truly tell the difference. This is just a way to blanket ban things and take them out of public discussion, out of public debate, out of public view, and out of public thought.
Google and YouTube admit that they're not just following their own community guidelines. Sure, they set up rules and they said everyone has to follow the rules and they could ban you if you break the rules, but they admit what they're doing right now, and Facebook and other social media platforms are doing it too, is they're targeting content that admittedly doesn't break community guidelines, but it comes close to it. It's approaching the boundaries, right? In other words, stuff that doesn't break the rules, they're now targeting. And in this document, How Google Fights Disinformation, they admit straightforwardly that after the community guidelines, they have a secondary set of rules that are internal, that are not disclosed to the public, in which they use to basically demote content, censor and remove content, and bury it inside their algorithm. So they claim they're going to keep content on the platform unless it violates their community guidelines. But they say right here, YouTube maintains a more detailed and living set, in other words, constantly changing, set of enforcement guidelines that provide internal guidance on the enforcement of public community guidelines. These are extensive and dynamic to assure that policies apply to changing trends and new patterns of controversial content online. Well, controversy is synonymous with having a point of view, with dissenting against whatever might be dominant at the time. It's just part of any democratic society, any society with free speech and the right to free views at all. But they admit that they have internal guidelines to help them rein in, controversial content, and that these are evolving, and that, quote, YouTube does not typically disclose these updates to the public because doing so would make it easier for unscrupulous users to evade detection. So in other words, everyone else has no idea what could get them banned or demoted tomorrow. No one knows what rules to play by, and Google all but admits it in their policy document.
So in applying their principles to YouTube's news and politics. So this is about Google's principles now. What you get to know and see on YouTube is about what Google's principles are. The first solution included making authoritative sources readily available, which I think is just kind of a total joke on its face, because people don't go to YouTube to watch mainstream media outlets. Mainstream media outlets already have their own channels on television. People want to go see a mainstream media outlet, they're going to go to TV and watch that. They're not coming to YouTube to watch that. YouTube was supposed to be a source for independent voices. That's why it's called YouTube, not TheyTube or mainstream tube. It says assumed within this principle is the demotion of disinformation, which they've now outlined. So they're going to demote information that's not from authoritative sources on these specific topics. They've also built 2 cornerstone products, a top news shelf and a breaking news shelf, which will prominently display authoritative political news information. And the breaking news shelf triggers whenever there's a significant news event that's happening, and it will only have content from authoritative sources. So there's not going to be any independent journalists in this breaking news, top news, any of that. When something happens, independent journalists on the ground will be demoted. They're not going to be showing up because they're not going to be considered authoritative sources. They said, after breaking news events happen, it takes some time for journalists to create authoritative fact-based video content and upload it to YouTube, while unscrupulous uploaders can more quickly upload bizarre conspiracy theories, which is, again, going to be anything that's questioning the official narrative of what's going on the ground. And it says, historically, they delivered the most relevant content that matched whatever the person typed in. But now they're going to add the appropriate guardrails. That's the phrase they use, the appropriate guardrails. The first step towards a resolution involves creating systems that determine when a breaking news event is happening and then tilt results tied to that event toward authority and away from relevance, popularity, or recency. So it's not going to be about the average independent person on YouTube. It's going to be tilting their search results towards authority. They straight up say that.
So all the problems of the echo chamber are now not even remotely democratic. And the tiny, tiny handful of social media companies and the slightly larger handful of corporate news agencies are now going to pat each other on the back and confirm themselves as authoritative and trustworthy news sources, and basically demote and marginalize almost all independent media, all independent voices, and dissenters of all kind on the internet. And because YouTube in particular has been such an important platform for independent and dissenting voices, they're cracking down really hard in all kinds of ways. And they released a new document through Google explaining exactly how they're going to counter misinformation on the web. And they're sharing this with places like the Munich Security Conference, which is supposed to deal with things like terrorist attacks in Europe. And they're coordinating it with NGOs and, again, corporate news organizations that are operating globally. And basically, this is it. This is the culling of the web. It's the end of free speech. It's the closing of the wild, wild west frontier. And it's a new age where they're basically going to have streamlined, authorized, and verified content. And anything that doesn't meet that criterion, well, isn't going to be very well represented on the web. It's going to be hard to find if it's allowed at all.
We're going to have to rebuild within this wild, wild west of information flow some sort of curating function that people agree to. There has to be, I think, some sort of way in which we can sort through information that passes some basic truthiness tests.
Losing a lot of people because of the internet, and we have to do something. We have to go see Bill Gates and a lot of different people that really understand what's happening. We have to talk to them, maybe in certain areas, closing that internet up in some way. Somebody will say, oh, freedom of speech, freedom of speech. These are foolish people. We have a lot of foolish people. We have a lot of foolish people.
So Google's February 2019 How Google Fights Disinformation document talks about how they team up with newsrooms and outside experts to basically determine which content they need to wipe out. That they have partnered with NGOs who set up foundations, and these have been set up by typical corporate news agencies to verify each other's work. And they use the terms that they're going to endorse each other's news coverage. It's clearly set up as a gatekeeping operation, and it's like YouTube has become TheyTube all over again. And they list some of the experts they partner with as being the First Draft Coalition, the Trust Project, and the International Fact-Checking Network. Well, first of all, the Trust Project claims it has this process of 8 key factors and 30 some odd peripheral factors that determine whether or not journalism should be credible and whether or not it's fact-checked. And they're going to self-verify each other between a pool of news agencies to make sure they're up to snuff and that readers could trust them. And this Trust Project, which Google partners with, and in fact it says search engines and social media companies are one of their key external partners. Well, this group was founded by the DPA news agency, The Economist, the Globe and Mail, Hearst Television, the independent journal review Haymarket Media, Institute for Nonprofit News, Italy's La Repubblica, and the Washington Post. So that's 2 firms that go to Bilderberg, and Hearst Television from the Hearst media empire, basically the inventor of yellow journalism, one of the most notorious, obvious offenders of fake news, of made-up narratives, of sensational stories that might have at best a grain of truth, invented to sell papers and sensationalize to the public. A newspaper organization that notoriously had a stake in starting the Spanish-American War and provoking a crisis in Cuba. An organization that, while they may be doing better today, are hardly the roots of truthfulness and trustworthiness in journalism. But I do digress, because Google also talks about their other external partner, the First Draft Coalition, and they too are partnered with a number of news organizations and journalists who've worked for a number of mainstream news outlets, and they are all about this whole narrative of misinformation and disinformation and of the threat of conspiracy theories. The words that Google and other social media outlets are spewing are being fed to them by the research of the First Draft news organization and of other organizations doing similar research. And just one of their documents is 5 lessons for reporting in an age of disinformation. And they have this key graphic that is the centerpiece of their entire article about the trumpet of amplification and how basically conspiracy communities mediate disinformation and untrustworthy information all the way across the internet and all the way up to professional media outlets who don't know any better and aren't trained well enough to disseminate truth from untrustworthy information they found online. Anything conspiratorial is just automatically always fake. Explain how that works. And they go on to argue that even debunking efforts promote these conspiracy theories, and they have to retrain journalists from the ground up to know how to deal with conspiratorial information online so they can shut it down, because it shouldn't be allowed to exist, and it's just a matter of learning how to corral the herds of people online. I mean, come on. Number 5 is just kind of funny. They say they need to inoculate. They're going to vaccinate the information of the web sphere. They need to do more reporting that helps explain the issues that are often subjects of disinformation campaigns. And they know that the following topics are the most common forms of disinformation, and these need to be countered. Not only the integrity of the election system and attempts to sow hate and division on the basis of various isms and whatnot, but also conspiracies about global networks of power, because they simply don't exist. Very important and powerful people. They don't network.
That's a conspiracy. They don't exist at all.
And they say that.
Wow.
Hold on. And then after claiming that powerful networks of global elite don't exist, they explain that they're nonprofit, that they are funded, first of all, by their founding partner, Google News Initiative, but also by the James L. Knight Foundation, the Craig Newmark Philanthropies, the Open Society Foundation, which is what Soros, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation.
What is so anti-scientific that it shouldn't be out there?
The Ford Foundation, the Rita Allen Foundation, and a couple of other people. So they're super unbiased, and they're not part of a global elite network, even though some of the richest and wealthiest individuals on the planet
are the ones
bankrolling this organization.
So do you see how that works? I guess it's easy for them to say that then.
But these are the people who are going to certify what is trustworthy and basically, ultimately, what is allowable speech online.
A community rates low on an information scale when the press, radio, and other channels of communication are controlled by only a few people. The lower your community rates on economic distribution and information scales, the lower it is likely to rate on respect and power scales, and thus to approach despotism.
The second solution focuses on providing context to help people make their own decisions. I love that. That is such an Orwellian phrase. That is such an Orwellian way to put things. So they're going to provide context now to help you make your decision. And the context is going to come in the form of additional information or informational cues. So first off, they've decided to put little blurbs to let you know which governments own which news channels, which I think most people were pretty well aware of that to begin with. So that's going to be the first thing. But they're also going to, it says here, another information panel product launched last year aims to provide additional factual information from outside sources. Additional factual information. That sounds pretty legitimate, right? But then they go on to say the links are going to include credible sources such as Encyclopedia Britannica and Wikipedia. So Wikipedia now, according to Google, is an additional source that provides factual information. Okay, I'm going to get back to this in just a second, but let's talk about Wikipedia for a second. First of all, there's a guy, and I didn't know about this at all until just recently. This just came out in January. Meet the man behind a third of what's on Wikipedia. This guy named Stephen Pruitt has made 3 million edits to Wikipedia.
The Virginia native has made nearly 3 million edits on Wikipedia, written 35,000 original articles.
There's only 5.7 million English Wikipedia articles that exist, and he's edited 3 million of them. And he lives at home with his parents, and he sings opera, and he edits Wikipedia. To the point that
Time magazine named him one of the top 25 most influential people on the internet, alongside President Trump, J.K. Rowling, and Kim Kardashian West.
That's how influential this guy is that nobody knows about, who's editing a third of Wikipedia. So
even his day job is research, working in records and information at the U.S. Customs and Border Protection. Do your colleagues at work know what you do?
Oh, yes.
What do they think of it?
Probably that I'm nuts.
that. Secondly, it came out last decade, and this was really big in the news back in 2007, 2008, that some of the major editors of Wikipedia are the CIA, the FBI, world governments and political parties, and major corporations.
When a tracing program developed at the Santa Fe Institute called Wikiscanner discovered that computers at CIA headquarters had been used to make edits to entries on the U.S. invasion of Iraq and the biographies of former CIA head William Colby and former presidents Ronald Reagan and Richard Nixon. An FBI computer had also been used to edit the entry on the U.S.'s Guantanamo Bay detention facility. Since then, the intelligence agencies have had to camouflage their edits or outsource them to third parties.
And it's pretty easy to do that as far as outsourcing to third parties. You just pay a guy and...
That's who's making edits to Wikipedia. People who have vested interests in tilting the information towards their point of view. And the Vatican. Oh yeah, also the Vatican, I forgot to mention. So it's to the point that there's even a page on Wikipedia called Conflict of Interest Editing. It says right here, you had everything from the CIA and FBI and Vatican to both the US Democratic and Republican parties to Britain's Labour Party, Britain's Conservative Party, the Canadian government, United Nations, the US Senate, the Department of Homeland Security, the Israeli government, ExxonMobil,
Walmart, Dow Chemical, Disney, Nestle, Pepsi, Sony, Fox News, CBS, the Washington Post.
I mean, it just goes on and on. These are the people that it's not just some person that's editing Wikipedia. It's the people who have a vested interest in swaying you to their point of view who are editing Wikipedia.
Yeah, well, Wikimedia, the nonprofit arm of
Which is about revenues of what is it?
Yeah, they make 75 million, I think was the last year revenue, and
that's all donations?
Donations, yeah. It used to be donations from users, now it's donations from users and large corporations and governments, like the government of Kazakhstan, and they just they'll take money from anybody.
Right. Well,
no surprise if you look at the list of companies that have donated to Wikipedia, they have pretty nice pages.
And as a matter of fact, Larry Sanger, co-founder of Wikipedia, left the organization specifically due to his concerns about the integrity of Wikipedia. And he said that in some fields and topics, there are groups who squat on articles and insist on making them reflect their own specific biases, and there's no credible mechanism to approve versions of articles. They're rewriting history on this Wikipedia, but this Wikipedia is going to be provided to you now as a additional factual information source.
Until it becomes much more obvious to the world at large that this is not a site that we should hold to have any credibility at all, then, I mean, it would be one thing if it was just considered a biased source, like just a sort of a trash rag, the bathroom wall of the internet, I like to call it. But it's not. It's considered this sort of holy oracle of truth, and it's really anything but.
And I just think it's really weird because back in the day when I was in grad school, I taught freshman English for a year, and students were not allowed to use Wikipedia as a primary source in any paper that they turned in to me or our department. So it's really bizarre to go from that to now.
What is this doing to our system of information?
Well, it's just, I mean, the fact that people take this at face value is really, I mean, it's degrading the meaning of just the concept of truth, for one thing, because it's become this consensus thing.
This is also, Wikipedia is also what's feeding all of these quote-unquote smart assistants. And when people ask Alexa, for example, of Amazon questions, she's regurgitating to them what comes out of Wikipedia. So this is going to be used now as this official world source of information. And I don't even understand how anyone can take that seriously. And that's before you find out that some of the main editors of Wikipedia, besides Opera Guy over there, are intelligence agencies, governments, religious institutions like the Vatican, and major corporations, all of whom have a vested interest in crafting and presenting their version of events.
There's a vested interest in the official line. There's an official line that transcends monetary interest and political divisions and different groups at the top, that they're concerned about secret histories and faux authoritative explanations. Well, maybe what you have is a lot of people who began to ask questions and who looked into things and found the so-called authoritative explanations to be hollow, to be completely shallow and lacking of any context of actual history, and who began to research it for themselves, because that's the kind of journey I found myself on. What this is a larger battle about whether or not we have a right to look into things for ourselves, whether we have a right to be independent individuals, or whether we're just supposed to be passive consumers of information that's fed to us and authorized and verified and given to us as a herd, as a batch of people.
And a lot of debate about, well, then what's the responsibility of the network to expose people to different points of view or filter out things that are wrong?
And here's the kicker about what Bill Gates said. It says here that you're going to see panels from Wikipedia alongside videos on topics such as quote-unquote moon landing hoax that link to information from credible sources, including Encyclopedia Britannica and Wikipedia. And then they show you an example here of what a search for moon landing looks like. And you're only going to get, not only are you going to get the information bar on Encyclopedia Britannica, but you're going to get USA Today, that's an authoritative source for them, Sky News, NASA, you get the official NASA story on what they say about the moon landing, NBC News. So that's what you get now when you go trying to search for that. So that's what you're going to get. You're going to get an information bubble now that is the platform exposing you to the official authoritative point of view. If you type in moon landing hoax into YouTube now, and I'm just using this example because it's the one they used in their document, not only do you get the Encyclopedia Britannica Apollo Space Program blurb at the top to inform you of what that is, but you get CNET moon landing conspiracy debunked again, Discovery UK, Mythbusters saying the moon landing's not a hoax, video from space, filmmaker says moon landings weren't fake, Vidya debunks conspiracy theories about moon landing, BuzzFeed making a joke about crazy ramblings of crazy people that say that they don't believe the moon landing happened, debunking lunar landing conspiracies. And so you're going to just be inundated with this. And if you get to a page where you've actually found a moon landing hoax video, your sidebar of what to watch next is going to be filled up with a lot of links to official authoritative moon landing sources to try and change your mind. This is the information bubble that they're going to put everybody into now, because that's the social responsibility apparently of these corporations. This is how they're going to fight disinformation. So as you can see, this is way beyond just censoring people or demonetizing and demoting videos and burying them with algorithms. There's an agenda here, a pretty clear one, to re-educate people to quote-unquote authoritative sources. So I don't know if you guys have noticed, but your Watch Next feed now has been totally hijacked by these algorithm changes, to the point that if you do look up something controversial, not only are they going to put the official establishment viewpoint in there, but even if you don't look up something controversial, they're putting that in there now for people. My daughter came to me complaining because all of a sudden, out of nowhere, she's an artist and she likes to listen to Japanese music. That is her thing. She loves to do that. And so she'll put on a playlist or something in the background while she's drawing. And all of a sudden now, they're just shoving pro-vaccine videos in there, just randomly in the next feed. She'll be in the middle of trying to listen to this music, just have it play in the background, and all of a sudden, oh, here's all the benefits of vaccines. It has nothing to do with what she's watching, right? Oh, and she also said they started promoting mainstream artists in there too, like Katy Perry. which is not something she's ever historically listened to, but they're trying to shove that in there. I mean, nobody wants this. People go looking for something because that's what they wanted, but now you can't even get, usually you look up a video and then you'll get more videos on that topic, which is helpful when you're trying to watch about a certain thing. But now the algorithm's all jacked up. It doesn't even work that way anymore. So now they're just going to shove things in there because they're going to run the algorithms and decide what alternative points of view you need to be exposed to today. And it isn't just YouTube that's doing this. Facebook's doing it too. I mean, I haven't used Facebook really on a personal level since I put up the Sean Parker social validation feedback loop programming video. What I noticed on Facebook, and you tell me if you've seen this, but it happened to me many times. All of a sudden in the wall, there would be pro-gun control videos. There would be pro-mandating forced vaccination, why that's great, which I know I'm not friends with a bunch of people on there who are anti the Bill of Rights. So it doesn't make sense to me that I would all of a sudden have all of this narrative being pushed on my wall, but it was. It's basically like they took what I put on my personal posts and then they said, here's all the viewpoints that are incorrect. Here's where we can expose her to quote unquote alternative points of view. Just like Bill Gates said. So this technology is not neutral, okay? It's not going to just be a tool that we use. It is a tool that's going to be used on us to expose us. That's the social responsibility, quote unquote, of these major tech corporations to expose us to alternative points of view. Which leads us to behavioral sequencing. That's right, behavioral sequencing.
As the examination of protein structures paved the way to genetic sequencing, the mass, multi-generational examination of actions and results could introduce a model of behavioral sequencing. As gene sequencing yields a comprehensive map of human biology, researchers are increasingly able to target parts of the sequence and modify them in order to achieve a desired result. As patterns begin to emerge in the behavioral sequences, they too may be targeted. The ledger could be given a focus, shifting it from a system which not only tracks our behavior, but offers direction towards a desired result.
So it's not about just censorship or digital book burning or black holing information, which is bad enough as it is. That's bad enough as it is. That he got this window that popped up in his Facebook disputed by multiple independent fact checkers. Before you share this content, you might want to know that the fact-checking sites Snopes.com and Associated Press disputed its accuracy. It's not just about censoring what they're now calling fringe beliefs.
Basically any source outside of the mainstream.
Yeah, no alternative media allowed.
It's about digital re-education. It's about putting people into a carefully curated information bubble and then digitally re-educating them with the official authoritative information. The question is, what's going to happen when that point of view becomes the only official, sanctioned point of view that's allowed to be had? That's where the question comes in.
That's what you got with Wikipedia, yet it's treated as this sort of this sacred.
Well, Google uses it as a fact check.
So does YouTube. I think Facebook was going to do that for a while, and now they're using Snopes, which is just as bad.
So the future will have one answer. Do you guys remember when Bilderberg Attendee and former Google CEO Eric Schmidt went on Charlie Rose? And he said when people type in something in the search engine, they're only supposed to get one answer, and if they don't, it's a bug?
What my question is leading to is help us understand where's the future of search going.
Well, when you use Google, do you get more than one answer? Of course you do.
Yeah, of course.
Well, that's a bug.
Yeah.
Because we should be able to give you the right answer just once. We should know what you meant. You should look for information. We should give it exactly right, and we should give it to you in your language. And we should never be wrong.
Because they're going to determine what that one answer is, and that's going to be what people know. They sure are making the future sound like a place where there's no room for nuance or disagreements or anything. I mean, even in the March issue that just came out of Wired magazine, there was an article about Alexa. I haven't even read the article yet, but the cover of it says, voice computing seeks the one perfect response to any question. That's why it's going to upend our relationship with information. Because we're being trained by this technology to live in a world where you get one answer. You get piecemeal bits of information and you trust the computer, the technology, whatever, to give you the one right answer for everything. I mean, that's what we're being trained to accept. I mean, can you imagine the world that that's going to produce in another 20, 30, 50 years?
These children are being taught to accept uncritically whatever they're told. Questions are not encouraged.
Where you only get one authoritative version of everything and every other opinion that doesn't jive with the authoritative version is buried?
How can you ask such a question? Have you got a textbook?
Yes, ma'am.
Does it say here that our law courts are always just?
Yes, ma'am.
Then how dare you question the fact?
Well, and it's a problem reaction solution to give the sense of basic freedom to people online and then point out all these problems and say, well, this is why you can't have nice things. And so then people will think that they don't deserve that freedom.
And if you specifically tailor, like through Google ad search, putting all the results that are paid for at the top of the search list, if you tailor information that way, you could lead to a lot of harm. Best case example is we hear 50,000 stories about Paris every day, but not a single one about Beirut because they're all shadowed out. They're on the back 30 pages of Google. Well, in a world that only sees the Paris and not the Beirut, what's the point of having a dialogue on any conversation if it's always going to be one-sided? And we know that there's an outside actor who's tailoring what you're given for a specific purpose. Before the Reformation, the only people who could read the Bible were the ones who knew Latin. So any information you got about Scripture came through a priest or came through the hierarchy of the church, came through people who knew Latin. Today's day and age, we rely heavily on hearsay. Really, like most of our knowledge about world events does not come from personal experience. So I say in a similar vein, you have that kind of construct. And it may boil over just like with the Reformation, like an information renaissance, because there is very much a disconnect. If you're constantly surrounded by tailor-made information and it's designed to get a very real impulse out of you, whether it's you vote for this or you buy this, a lot of people are going to start questioning that.
Some people are going to be naive enough to think that they're seeing other people's opinions and that they're seeing discourse, and they're going to believe things have had a chance to work themselves out in argumentation and the kind of criticism we imagine once existed in the world. And what they're really going to be seeing is paid, authorized, hack information that is just simply sent down from above to appease people. Some people are going to be so naive and raised in a world of falseness that they won't even recognize reality, true information. They won't sense in their gut truth when they hear it. That's what they want to create, is a generation and subsequent generations of people who don't even know the difference and can't find the difference.
I just cannot imagine anything more Orwellian than this. If they can sway all of the information into one viewpoint to where you can't question certain governments, you can't question certain science, you can't question historical events, you can't question things anymore. Tyranny, that is going to result in a tyranny. That is giving way too much power to establishment. The fact that they're going to this level just shows you how much power the individual still has, that they have to take it to this level. It really does go way beyond censorship. And the Weekly Hellscape came in and responded, it's also about preventing whole branches of thought from forming. If you can stop people from accessing info that would lead them to a host of conclusions unfavorable to your interests, you can protect those interests with minimal effort, and most people will have no idea. Which is an exceptional point. It's shutting down thought completely, and new thoughts from forming based on that thought. It's a ripple effect. And Meowman just pointed out the fact that it's amazing to watch how many people are so pleased with this censorship and cheering it on, completely blind to the fact that their own freedom of thought is in front of the steamroller as well. I would just say I don't think a lot of people fully understand the ramifications of what's happening right now.
The whole reason for YouTube being set up as a countervalve to the controlled, hand, spoon-fed information from corporate news networks ever since the launch of TV has been eradicated. There is no more YouTube. It won't be the collective voice of many people bringing up all kinds of ideas, stuff that you couldn't think of all this stuff. It's all kinds of interesting content, and it's silly, entertaining crap and pranks and cat videos, but it's also a lot of people with various political views who just really are trying to let their 2 cents be heard. And instead of letting that process continue successfully, they're instead going to rein them in and filter them out and just re-promote corporate content. It's sickening, and it's completely 1984. This is 1984 more than anything that we've seen yet. They're not only memory holding information, but they're proving that who controls the past controls the future. It's horrifying, and it's pretty clear that if the loudest voices, the most established voices, the most corporate voices, if they were telling the truth, they would have nothing whatsoever to fear from little tiny dissenting critical voices. They would be gnats. They would be slightly annoying at the worst. It's a core truth, so ask yourself then, why is it happening? And where will people like us be allowed to be heard in the future?
There's a reason we don't burn books. Even if it's the worst viewpoint in the world and 99.999% of all humanity agrees that book contains the worst viewpoint that has ever been written by a person ever in the history of time, it should still be there so that people can then study it and try to understand it, so history does not repeat itself. It should still stand. And if it's that horrible, then it should be refuted. But you shouldn't just disappear it. You can't learn from history if the history is being edited, rewritten, and black-holed. And maybe that's the point. And just to end this video, and because I think it's so relevant and so important, I just want to read to you guys a couple paragraphs out of George Orwell's 1984. I feel like that book becomes more relevant every day now. It's way more relevant than when he wrote it. He picked up the children's history book and looked at the portrait of Big Brother, which formed its frontispiece. The hypnotic eyes gazed into his own. It was as though some huge force were pressing down upon you, something that penetrated inside your skull, battering against your brain, frightening you out of your beliefs, persuading you almost to deny the evidence of your senses. In the end, the party would announce that 2 and 2 made 5, and you would have to believe it. It was inevitable that they should make the claim sooner or later. The logic of their position demanded it. Not merely the validity of experience, but the very existence of external reality was tacitly denied by their philosophy. The heresy of heresies was common sense. And what was terrifying was not that they would kill you for thinking otherwise, but that they might be right. For after all, how do we know that 2 and 2 make 4, or that the force of gravity works, or that the past is unchangeable? If both the past and the external world exist only in the mind, and if the mind itself is controllable, what then? The party told you to reject the evidence of your eyes and ears. It was their final, most essential command. His heart sank as he thought of the enormous power arrayed against him, the ease with which any party intellectual would overthrow him in debate, the subtle arguments which he would not be able to understand, much less answer. And yet he was in the right. They were wrong, and he was right. The obvious, the silly, and the true had got to be defended. Truisms are true. Hold on to that. The solid world exists. Its laws do not change. Stones are hard. Water is wet. Objects unsupported fall toward the earth's center. With the feeling that he was speaking to O'Brien, and also that he was setting forth an important axiom, he wrote, "Freedom is the freedom to say that 2 + 2 make 4. If that is granted, all else follows."